You do stir the pot.
And I don't try, I just tell the truth and they overreact.
Jesse Peterson has been raising hell with his Christian crusade to bring peace and harmony in America. See what this black evangelist and author has to say about facing down the race pimps and standing up for America, next on Full Disclosure.
Relentless, probing, fearless. This is Emmy Award-winning Full Disclosure with Leslie Dutton, bringing you the truth by revealing the news behind the news.
Hello, I'm Leslie Dutton. Today on Full Disclosure, we're bringing you the news behind the news in this part one of our interview with Reverend Jesse Lee Peterson. Jesse has been an advocate for the poor and helpless in Los Angeles for the past 2 decades. We asked him to explain his background. It had to do with starting an organization, didn't it?
Yes. Well, I grew up down in Alabama, outside of Montgomery, Alabama. I grew up on a plantation down there, and my parents and their parents and their parents worked the plantation. I grew up at a time when the Jim Crow laws were around, and we were not allowed to live in certain areas.
Jim Crow laws refer to the separate but equal laws that were enacted to segregate public schools, public places, and public transportation, and restrooms, restaurants, and drinking fountains for whites and blacks.
I remember going to a movie theater once when I was a teenager, and the blacks had to sit in the balcony. We were not allowed to sit downstairs with white Americans. But at that time I was fine with that because we had a better view from the balcony, so it was okay with me. And I say that to say that even though the laws were against us and we had to work cotton fields and things like that, not one time was I raised to hate white folks. I was told to treat people the way I would like to be treated, work hard, and do the right thing, and then you can make it in America.
And that became his moral credo, established by his parents. But things changed when he came to L.A. The churches in Los Angeles preached a different message than the church he attended in Alabama.
But when I left home and I moved to Los Angeles at the age of 18, I was on my own. I felt a sense of insecurity. I was in a big city, and so I started going to some of the black churches to try to get over my insecurities. And they told me that, it's not you, it's the white man, it's racism. And long story short, I started listening to the black preachers and Jesse Jackson and others, and they said, well, the white man is trying to hold you down. So I became resentful toward white Americans because I believed that lie.
But that lie was conflicting with his deep faith in God. He searched his soul to find the answer.
A long story short, because I write about this in my book, Scam, How the Black Leadership Exploits Black America, I realized that I was being lied to by the so-called civil rights leaders and others. And so I asked God to help me to overcome my anger, to show me how to get myself together. And he showed me that I needed to forgive, and that I needed to forgive my mother first because she had some resentment toward my father, and she passed it on to me. And I became like her because I resented her for that.
Forgiveness became his key to salvation.
And so when I forgave my mother, God forgave me, and it just changed my whole life. He gave me perfect peace, took away all of my fears and doubts and insecurities. But I realized that black Americans are suffering not because of racism, but the lack of moral character. That they have been lied to by the racist, godless so-called black leadership. And they had turned their lives over to the government under Lyndon B. Johnson.
President Lyndon Johnson promoted a host of social programs that came to be called the Great Society. During the 60s, there were dozens of new major federal spending programs that addressed education, medical care, urban problems, and transportation. The goals of these reforms were the elimination of poverty and racial injustice.
Lyndon B. Johnson told them, we're going to help you because of racism, but you can't have a man in the home. And so they took the fathers out of the home, and the government became the daddy of the family, and the corrupt black leadership became the head of the people. And it's just been downhill ever since. And they have been controlling blacks by keeping them angry, because whomever caused you to become angry, they also control you.
Not to sit by and watch the continuing decline of the black Americans, Jesse took action.
When I realized that, I started the organization BOND, the Brotherhood Organization of a New Destiny, and our purpose is to rebuild the family by rebuilding the man. I believe that we can get men to turn back to God and love Him with all their heart, soul, and might, get married before having children, and husband and wife guide their children in the right way to go, then we can create a better society.
In the face of declining morals, openly promoted by the glamorous entertainment industry and some public officials, Jesse Peterson's programs are seeing great success.
And I'm proud to tell you that we've been doing this now for the last 22 years, and we've done it without one penny from the government. We have not asked for a dime from the government. We're doing it the American way. People helping us to help others, and the people we help, they give their time and finance as well so that we can help other people.
When you started BOND, and the Home for Young Men,
Yes.
how did you reach out to them? How did you find the people that needed help?
Well, what happened was, at the time, I knew no one, and so I heard this preacher on radio, and I called him up one day and told him what I just told you, and I said I wanted to reach out and help Black Americans overcome their anger and tell them what's really wrong, but I don't have any money and I don't know anyone. And he said, well, come over, let me meet you, let's talk. And I went over, we met, and at the time he was doing a radio show, so he told me I could use his building to have my meetings, and he announced on the radio show that this black guy, Jesse Peterson, doing a meeting, he wanted to help black folks. And about 80 to 100 people showed up. And I was like scared. I'm like, oh my God, I had never done this before, and I'm like, wow.
But his message worked. He touched the people who came to the meeting, and they became motivated to change their lives in a meaningful way.
And so I told them about the anger, how they were being deceived by black leadership and black preachers. And I said, you got to take hold of your own life. You got to get over your anger so you can feel better and move forward. And from there, they loved that meeting, and they wanted to have another one. So we had another one. And then they wanted another one. I said, okay, we'll do another one. And I said, let's come up with a name of an organization. So we had 3 or 4 people bring in some names, and we voted on BOND, the Brotherhood Organization of a New Destiny. And one thing just led to another one. The next thing I knew, I was on Phil Donahue show, Geraldo. The LA Times did a story on me, and that led me to different things. So it's just been one step after another.
But these steps haven't always been positive. His criticism of the black power structure has generated a huge amount of dangerous anger towards him. He'll tell us all about that when we come back from this short break. We'll be right back.
The people are the ones who are in power, but they need to realize that. It's not the politicians, it's not the people that end up getting elected who are in control. It is actually the people at the ground level. Efforts like full disclosure are really the only way that the public really can find out what's going on. It's truly freedom of the press.
Welcome back to Full Disclosure and our interview with Reverend Jesse Peterson. As a way to expand his outreach, Jesse tried his hand at hosting a radio show. So the outreach began with a radio program.
Yes.
And the word spread.
Yes. I thought to myself, how can I get this message out to black Americans that it's not racism that's holding you back? White folks are not waking up every morning at the breakfast table trying to figure out how to keep the Negroes down. I said that they have their own issues, their family issues, high taxes. They're trying to work their own problems out. So I said, how can I get this out to the black community? So I went on radio out in KTYM, Inglewood, California, and had never done radio before. It's amazing. And so I go on radio and I talk about what I just told you, and I said, you got to get away from these the so-called leaders, start thinking for yourself. And I gave out the phone number, opened up the lines, and all these people start calling in. And I'm thinking, yeah, right on, you know.
Yeah, right on. Except when he got in response was hate, ugly, vindictive, and dangerous hate.
Instead, they were angry at me. They were calling me Uncle Tom, sellout, you hate your mama, you hate your daddy, you hate being black. And they called me names that I'd never heard before. I'm like, what is that name? You know, what does that mean? And then they were saying that white people were paying me to do this. And so every time they would say white people were paying me to do it, I said, hold on, let me do a commercial break right here. If there are any white folks out there that want to pay me to do this, here's my phone number. Because if I can get paid for doing it, that's even better, right?
He always keeps a light heart about the trials he faced, but the extent and vehemence of the anger was a crushing realization.
It got so bad, they threatened the manager, his family, they were going to blow up the tower. And so the guy really liked me. He really wanted to keep me there, but he finally had to let me go. And so far, I've been banned from 3 radio stations in Los Angeles. But the good thing about it, when you love what's right and you do what's right, whenever one door closes on you, another one will open up for you. And it's been that way for the last 22 years.
But his core outreach has always been BOND, the Brotherhood Organization of a New Destiny. Your dream was to eventually open this home for boys. Where is it located, and how many people do you accommodate, and how did you get it started?
And to be honest with you, I didn't have a dream to do it. It just, there came a point after I started the organization where it was a need, because I was getting so many requests to, people from around the country. They wanted to send their boys over to us so we could help them. And so I told some of the members of the organization about, we're getting these requests from other parts of the country. And I do want to add, we work with all boys, all races, young and old. But the primary focus was on the black young man because he's so screwed up. So we were trying to help him. But we help all, because these principles are of God and they apply to all of mankind. But so I told them we need to try to find some kind of home or something to try to help these guys. And they went out and they found a home. We bought it, and we opened it up. And it's here in Los Angeles.
His goal is to help those who want to help themselves break out of the impoverishing cycle of despair and despondency.
We get young men, some of them are recommended to us by their mothers because at a certain age they start to go out of control and they don't listen to their mothers and their fathers are not around. We also get men in from juvenile detention centers. Some of them are just off the streets, but we only take in guys who are really, really ready to overcome. They want to take control of their lives, and because there are certain things they can't do. They can't hang out at night all night long. They have to work. We help them find a job. They have to pay a portion of the rent because nothing in life is free. We teach them how to save. Every time they get paid, they have to put away 10% of their paychecks and then pay their rent, buy some food, groceries and things like that, because that's what the real world is like.
It's curious to note that Reverend Peterson doesn't blame slavery for enslaving the blacks, especially under the oppression of slavery. The family unit was imperiled, which made it critically important. He blames the insidious way the current government programs perpetrate the destruction of the black family.
There are many worse things that have happened to black Americans, but the first worst thing is the government coming in and replacing the father in the home. Not only did it break God's order of God and Christ, Christ and man, man over woman, and women over children, it's the spiritual order. It took away the opportunity for the children to get the identity of the fathers. Because when you don't love your father, it's impossible to love God. You will spend the rest of your life empty, lonely, feeling like a void is inside of you. Because whether we know it or not, accept it or not, believe it or not, the Father represents God on earth. He's a spiritual, he's like Christ on earth. And it's not that he's better than the woman, it's just that that's the order, and that order works.
Many people think the current welfare state encourages females to have babies out of wedlock to gain the greatest quantity of free benefits. This is what Jesse means when he says the government has replaced fathers as the head of the family.
And when they took the fathers out and the government became the daddy, it was the worst thing that can happen because a lot of these kids, boys and girls, are growing up feeling unloved. And so they rely on the government, and it takes away their desire to work and take care of themselves. Because if they had parents, the parents would teach them as kids to be responsible, clean the house, wash the dishes, do your homework. And that helped develop that character. So when you become an adult and go out on your own, you're ready to take care of yourself.
That emphasis on individual responsibility was all Jesse knew as a child.
It was like that when I was growing up. I knew nothing about government. I didn't even know government existed. It was when I would get out of school, I have to take off my school clothes and go right to the cotton field or whatever season it was. And that was good for me because I can take care of myself. I'm not afraid to take care of myself. I would take on any job because, to earn a living. And these boys and girls don't have that now. They're very lazy and insecure. They look to someone else to take care of them because the government stepped in and spoiled them rotten. And it's just not good for the character of mankind.
Jesse Peterson is an ordained minister with his fervent desire to share how God can rescue lives and lost souls. That was the only calling for him.
22 years ago, I was ordained by my deacon board and licensed by the state.
And so you decided to become a reverend because of a spiritual need?
Yeah, because what I realized is that, what I do is a calling upon me from God. And our battle is a spiritual battle. Everything we do in life is spiritual. It's not physical. The Bible says that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against spirits and principalities and wickedness in high places. We are a spirit. And so if I could get the people to see that we are a spirit, then they will stop judging people based on color and all those things. They will understand that it's not the person that is mean or doing wrong, but something is driving that person. And that way they deal with the issue but don't hate the person, because when you hate the person, you're judging, and when you judge, you're playing God, and when you play God, the true God is not your God. You're on your own. And so to, I want them to realize that it's a spiritual battle. It doesn't matter the color, and it doesn't matter if you're male or female. It's spiritual, and most people don't see that.
Jesse's had a considerable success in his effort to turn around the lives of wayward young people. We asked him to share some examples.
One that a whole lot of them I'm proud of, but we had a young man who came to us at the age of 15, angry young man, angry at his parents, and just had a lot of issues. We got together with he and his parents and dealt with that, and he was able to forgive them. And from there he went on to high school and finished high school with high honors. From there he went to Princeton, and he graduated with high honors at Princeton. And then he went to Stanford Law School up in Northern California, and he became a lawyer. He went from there back to Washington, D.C., and worked for a major law firm there for a few years. And now he's working for a judge up in Washington State. And in 2003, he is applying to work for one of the judges of the U.S. Supreme Court. And he eventually want to become a U.S. Supreme Court justice.
Oh.
And so that's just one example of what can happen when you overcome your anger. You learn how to speak up but don't resent, because he had a natural energy to do the right thing, to work hard, and he enjoyed it because he wasn't feeling badly on the inside.
Reverend Peterson has no compunction about criticizing the racist programs of Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton, as you will see when we come back from this short break. We'll be right back.
It is very important that everyone pay attention to what's going on and then join the cause. Always appreciated the diligent pursuit of truth that Full Disclosure has provided. Full Disclosure does a wonderful job of presenting the rest of the story.
Welcome back to Full Disclosure and our interview with the controversial Reverend Jesse Lee Peterson. Jesse takes issue with the Rainbow Push Coalition of Reverend Jackson. The way he manipulates black Americans is demeaning.
And in this case, they have turned their lives over to some of the worst of the worst of the worst. Race hustlers, poverty pimps, men and women who are about power and wealth, men and women, black men and women who hate white folks, who hate America as it is, who believes in the redistribution of wealth. We see that in Barack Obama right now. But Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton and those guys, race hustlers, most black preachers are not called by God, but by their mama, and they are teaching racism from the pulpit.
He's made a campaign out of ridiculing these socialist programs.
My organization held a National Day of Repudiation of Jesse Jackson for about 5 years. Wow. We will hold this big rally in front of his Rainbow Push office, Los Angeles, on Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday. And we will hold this day on, and we bring in speakers, we have signs and everything. And we will hold this day on Dr. King's birthday because we wanted to show the contrast between Dr. King's dream and Jesse Jackson's nightmare. So, Dr. King said that one day black Americans would be judged by the contents of character and not color. Jackson's nightmare is that most blacks are judged by their color because they lack character. Two examples of that. When I was growing up, less than 10% of black children were born out of wedlock. It was an embarrassment to have children out of wedlock. Excuse me. Well, today, nationwide, according to the Census Bureau, 70% of black babies are born out of wedlock nationwide. There's no embarrassment about it, no shame. They have baby showers, invite people over. The fathers are nowhere around. And that was it was just an embarrassment growing up. But because of the government and people like Jackson and others, it's out of control now.
He blames these race hustlers, as he calls them, for destroying the value of the family structure in the black community.
And another example is abortion. I've never heard of an abortion growing up. If a woman was pregnant with a handicapped child, she had that baby and did the best that she could do, and the father for that baby. If the baby survived, they took care of the baby. The baby expired, then they buried the baby. But they didn't kill the baby inside the mother's womb. But today, 70% of Planned Parenthood abortion mills are located in the inner cities. And every day, over 1,500 black babies are aborted. Every day. And there's no outcry about it. You don't hear the black preachers complaining about it. Jesse Jackson and Sharpton and those people, they don't say anything about it. As a matter of fact, they support Planned Parenthood rather than trying to stop this genocide upon the black unborn child.
Jesse has worked hard to get his fellow black ministers to speak out against this black genocide. But his cries have fallen on deaf ears.
We have gone out there and protested the abortion mills, my organization. I tried to get the black preachers to get involved. They would say, oh no, I can't do that because a woman has a right. It's her body, her choice. I'm like, this is insane. This is evil, you know. But the reason they won't stand up against evil is because the government gives the black churches a lot of money, and Jackson and those guys, to help, gang violence, out of wedlock birth, and all that stuff. And that money ends up in their pockets, really not helping the people.
We asked him to clarify his statement about the black churches receiving money from the government. We hear about all the time through the media, and that is separation of church and state.
Yes.
How can it be that the government is giving black churches money?
Well, that rule only applies to the white churches. The white churches is separated of church and state. When it comes to the black churches, it's a separate rule for them. They could get the money because they support, the Democratic Party. They support the liberals of our country, and so they tend to give more to them than they do to white churches. Because not all, but white churches tend to be more conservative in their belief and in their views. So they're treated a little differently than the black churches. I don't know if you noticed that whenever there is an election year, the politicians, white and black, goes into the black churches, stand in the pulpit and campaign. You know, they go there, but if a white preacher or a white politician did that same thing in a white church, all hell would break loose. It's a double standard in America. And because white folks are afraid to speak up, not all but most, they're afraid to speak up for fear of being called racist, then the Democrat and the government are allowed to get away with that. I'm sure you remember seeing Hillary Clinton and Al Gore and different politicians in these black churches acting like they're Christians and singing and dancing with black folks. And no one says anything about it because whites are afraid.
Wow. I'm getting the idea from what you're telling me that the hate is more of a tactic to control the population.
Absolutely.
Rather than anything else.
That's right. Because you can't control the moral people. You have to demoralize them in order to control them. And the anger that most blacks are feeling, it starts in the home first. Because a lot of these black women are raising children by themselves, and they have hatred for the father of the children. And because they can't get back at the fathers, they're not around, they take their anger out on the children. And the children become like the parents because you become like what you hate. So they take on that identity of their mothers and grandmothers. And instead of these black preachers and so-called politicians dealing with that anger that starts in their homes, they tell them, well, it's not you, it's racism. And they reach way back and talk about Jim Crow and slavery in Africa, so that these angry people don't see that it's the anger in the home. And so after a while, you start to believe that because when you're an angry person, it is easy to believe a lie. So they start to believe that it's the white folks that are holding them back. And once they believe that lie, they forget that they hate their parents, and they start to hate white Americans. And that's where Jackson and others want them at.
We want to thank Reverend Jesse Lee Peterson for appearing on Full Disclosure today. We want to know what you, the viewers, think. Do you think that the various leaders that have been promoted by the media are working to the detriment of black families and the communities that they're supposed to be helping? Please call our Full Disclosure Town Hall number and let us know what you think at 1-800-867-7777. That's 1-800-867-7777. And if you leave your name and number, we'll get back to you. Or you can log on to our website at fulldisclosure.net and leave your opinion there. And if you leave your email address, we'll be happy to respond. Please join us for part 2 of this program, where Reverend Peterson will share his viewpoint on the Trayvon Martin, George Zimmerman shooting in Florida. You may be surprised at his perspective. That's coming up next on the next edition of Full Disclosure. I'm Leslie Dutton. Thank you.
To respond to this question or comment on this program, please call 800-867-7777 or visit fulldisclosure.net. Transcripts or DVD copies of this program are also available on our website. Full Disclosure, the news behind the news.
In February of this year, George Zimmerman shot and killed 17-year-old Trayvon Martin in Florida, causing a huge backlash from the black community. Reverend Jesse Lee Peterson was much more circumspect about the incident.
And I have to tell you that had it been a black-on-white situation, they would not have shown up. None of them, Jackson and Sharpton and none of them, right? It's only when it's white on black, because that's when they can get blacks angry and get them riled up to come and support them.
Was this tragic death merely a publicity opportunity for Jesse Jackson? Reverend Peterson thinks so. Listen to his objective reasons next on Full Disclosure.
Relentless, probing, fearless. This is Emmy Award-winning Full Disclosure with Leslie Dutton, bringing you the truth by revealing the news behind the news.
Hello, I'm Leslie Dutton. Today on Full Disclosure, we're bringing you the news behind the news in this part 2 of our interview with Reverend Jesse Lee Peterson, author and founder of the Bond organization in Los Angeles. As a Christian minister, Jesse's all about preaching love of Christ as the answer to all of society's problems. We ask him, how is it possible to employ this concept in a pragmatic and practical way? How do we encourage people to love one another and to have love for the fellow man and for the family?
We have to tell them the truth. We have to be honest with them that they got to forgive, because when they forgive, then God will forgive them. And then once they forgive, then they see how to have love, because once you let go of the hate, then love is. You know, there's nothing left but love. But as long as you have any iota of resentment, you're never going to have real love. You have emotional love that come from resentment, but that's not a real love. It's just a love that build you up to let you down. But God's love is not what you think or what you feel. It just is. It's just the opposite of hatred or anger. That's why God said that before you enter into the kingdom, you must forgive, because anger is of Satan and love is of God, and both can't live inside of you. And so when you have that kind of anger, God is not there. Only Satan is guiding you.
There seems to be so much anger and hate in society today. We ask him, in his opinion, which is stronger, love or hate?
In all honesty, real love is stronger than anger or hatred. And that's why when you have God's love, real love, which is not a feeling, God's love is not a feeling at all. It's a knowing, it's a freedom. You can see what to do and do it. You don't have fear, you don't have doubts, you don't have worries, you have faith, and it just is, right? And that's why in God's love, one person can defeat an army, but the people who are hateful and angry, they need 1,000 on their side. And so love is stronger than the anger or than the hatred. That's why when I do debates, I'm uneducated. I have a high school degree, barely, but because I have truth on my side, and whenever I debate liberals, they put 2 or 3 up against me, and I just wipe them out.
Then the question arises, what brings happiness? Some people find happiness in the exaltation they feel when they are victorious over an opponent, but that certainly isn't love. Which is it, love or hate, that is identified with happiness?
That's a good question. There's a false sense of happiness that is associated with anger. You know how you can win the lottery and you feel a sense of happiness. That happiness is coming from anger. But there's a true happiness that comes from God, which is perfect love. You're never, ever, 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 but never up and down emotionally. I feel the same way about the people who like me as I do those who dislike me. It's because those who like you would turn on you too if they disagree with something you said or something you did, or you don't give them any money, they'll turn on you just like that. And so if you're into these that like you, your emotions are going to go up and down. And then the ones that hate you, you know where they're coming from. So, but perfect love is not, it has nothing to do with your outer environment at all. Not at all. It's just God's love within you.
Reverend Peterson was a public access TV producer, airing his programs on cable channels, just like Full Disclosure. We asked him to describe his programs.
It was in the 90s, late 90s. I did it in South Central LA. And I would do a talk show. We had a little light audience and everything. And we would deal with family issues, political issues, men and women relationships, parent and children or child relationships. We would deal with those kinds of things. And primarily to show the people how to overcome their anger, that it starts in the home first. They need to forgive so that God can forgive you. And I ended up becoming one of the #1 shows in South Central LA area there.
Wow.
Because I was just straight up and honest and had fun with it.
All 14 public access studios and channels were closed in Los Angeles in 2009 as a result of the DVCA law, which turned over control of the public access channels to the city of Los Angeles. Now, in a flagrant violation of the law, the public access fees paid by all the cable subscribers are being subverted by the city. Jesse agreed that this is a substantial loss to the community and not just financially speaking.
I thought that public access was a great thing for the community because a lot of these boys and girls who can't afford to go to college or some trade school, they were learning how to work cameras and produce shows and, do that work right there in the community. And so when they took that away, it was a big letdown and a great disappointment for a lot of people.
He was especially dismayed because the public access format provided real opportunities to the less fortunate.
I couldn't believe that they took it away, to be honest with you, because it was helping so many, especially inner kids, inner city kids. Mm-hmm. I knew it was helping others around the country as well. But the inner city kids, it gave them something to do, and it gave them a sense of pride about themselves, because they go around telling their friends, oh, I produced a Jesse Lee Peterson TV show, or I worked the cameras for Jesse Lee Peterson TV show, or they did this or that, edited and things like that.
That may be another reason the public access facilities are gone. They were encouraging independence and self-reliance. This doesn't empower government.
But that's how the government is. The government really don't want you to be free. They're not for families. They're not for individuality. They're not for freedom. They're for government control. They love that power, and whatever they can do to addict you to the government, they would do it. Whatever control they could get over your life, they would do it. And so that's why they won't let it go. But we the people, we have to unite together based on what is right, and we can force the government to do the right thing. Because if they don't do it, vote them out. And when they see that we're going to keep an eye on them and they don't do the right thing, throw out the bombs. Then things will start to change.
An informed and involved electorate is the answer, and thus Reverend Peterson shares a similar purpose as we here at Full Disclosure. We will hear more about what we as citizens can do to take back our country when we come back from this short break. We'll be right back.
Democracy is fundamentally a local thing. And without access to information which isn't being provided to you by a paid media or by some endorsement or sponsor or corporation, there is no free flow of information. We, the people, control the process, and therefore we need to exercise our liberties in order to maintain our freedom.
Welcome back to Full Disclosure and our interview with Reverend Jesse Peterson. Jesse recommends that we as American citizens gather together and develop social campaigns separate and unrelated to government programs. From his experience, this is the best way to solve our social problems.
If we can go directly, and which we have been doing, go directly to the people, go around the so-called leadership, because the leaders are not going to set the people free. They need the people for their own personal ego gratification. But if we could get the message out to the people, you definitely will have some hearts and minds changing.
For such a simple message, Jesse has been the target of a great deal of extreme hatred.
Over the last 22 years, I've gone through a lot for standing up for what is right. I've been called Uncle Tom, sellout, you hate your mama, you hate your daddy, you hate your color, white on the inside, black on the outside, Uncle Ruckus, just all kinds of names. I've been called nigger so much. Have you ever heard that word?
No.
Nigger?
I was told never to admit that.
See? White people are afraid of that word. While black people use that word all the time. And if that word was such a bad word, you would think that they would stop using it first, and then it would fade away. They only act like they don't like that word because they want to control white folks, and that's what that's all about. But I've been called nigger so much that I was thinking about changing my middle name. As a matter of fact, I told my staff one day, I think I'll just change my middle name from Jesse Lee Peterson to Jesse Nigger Peterson. See, what they don't realize, the enemy of truth, is that when you when you're operating from real love, you cannot be affected by words. Words just roll off your back. You don't take them personally at all. And that's another great thing about having perfect love. You cannot be hurt. It is impossible to be hurt by words.
But this perfect love is a lot more than merely having a thick skin, because the seed of anger will grow from under that skin.
But when you have any iota of anger inside of you, you could be affected by words. Your husband can make you feel badly, or make you feel good. Your kids can do it, your neighbor, your enemy. But if you don't resent them, if you have no resentment at all, there are no words on earth that can hurt you. And so they could call me all kinds of names. I don't care. I love what's right. I love my country.
And his love of his country transcends race, which totally conflicts with the perspective of Jesse Jackson and his followers.
I am not an African American. I don't have an afro. I have an Amerifro. There are no African drums beating in my chest. The American guitar is playing in my heart. I was born on a plantation, raised on a plantation, as black as the ace of spades, but 100% American.
But there's continuing violence against blacks, isn't there? For example, what about the recent Florida shooting of Trayvon Martin by George Zimmerman? Jesse Peterson has a unique perspective.
When the Trayvon Martin and George Zimmerman case first broke, and at the time Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson, the NAACP and Urban League, the Congressional Black Caucus, and other people running down there yelling racism, I said then, it is not what it seems. Because I don't know any time in history when any of those black people have ever been on the side of what is good. They're always on the side of wrong. And I said, because they're on the side of Trayvon Martin, I would suggest you wait and see and take the side of Zimmerman, because they're not going to tell you the truth. And they went down and protested and carried on until they finally got this guy in jail.
Is he suggesting that the black leaders are using the death of Trayvon Martin for political purposes? He most certainly is.
They are concerned that these people are not going to show up to vote in numbers. And so this Trayvon thing was supposed to rally them together, right? White racism, blah, blah, blah. And now we're finding out that it wasn't what they thought. Well, they knew the truth anyway. But apparently Trayvon, according to the medical reports and the autopsy that's out right now, George Zimmerman was attacked by Trayvon Martin. He was beat up. He has bruises on his head and other parts of his body. I don't know if they said his nose was broken, but something happened with the nose. Whereas with Trayvon, it showed that he only had scars on his knuckles and a gunshot wound. There was no indication that Zimmerman attacked him at all.
Jesse claims the media has played a significant role in promoting racist hysteria.
And the deceptive part of this whole deal, when they would show Trayvon picture on TV, they show some little innocent kid tiptoeing through the tulips, right? And here's this bad white guy who is attacking him. As one of the Congressional Black Caucus members said, Trayvon Martin was attacked while walking through a gated community being black, or something dumb like that, just to get the people motivated. So he wasn't some little innocent kid tiptoeing through the tulip. This white evil guy came along and shot him. Trayvon Martin, according to the report, was 6'2" or 3". Trayvon Martin had been thrown out of school several times. He was caught with a backpack that had, according to the reports, marijuana pipe in it, with traces of marijuana in those little plastic bags. He had been thrown out of school for graffiti on walls at school and other areas. He had a website page or something like that says at something my nigger, So this guy, and then he had these big old gold silver teeth in his mouth. And then his parents are not married, you know, so he was going from household to household because apparently he was visiting with his father in that area. But they showed you a little innocent child tiptoeing to the tulips, and that was to deceive us.
Oh my goodness.
Isn't that something?
Wow.
They deliberately, the liberal media, along with the godless black folks leadership and all the college students who participated, they deliberately tried to deceive us in order to gain what they wanted.
Wow.
Isn't that amazing?
That is.
And then his parents, it was reported that Trayvon Martin's parents and their attorney asked Al Sharpton to get involved. And I'm thinking, what type of parents are these? You know, why would they take something that's so serious and use it for political gain? You know, it just doesn't make sense. And then they go show these little young pictures of Trayvon when they knew that that wasn't the reality of who this boy was. But that's what we have in America today, nothing but deception.
What is the purpose of this deception? What can these people who are advocating racial strife hope to gain from distorting the truth and inciting anger, we ask him.
One thing that they were able to accomplish is to intimidate America, and especially white Americans. I believe they only put George Zimmerman in jail because they were afraid that if they didn't, then the black folks were going to riot. So I believe that's why George is in jail. And now my concern is that George Zimmerman may end up in prison and possibly given a death sentence, because if they don't find him guilty, then black people may riot. This is vigilante justice. It's not allowed in America, but because there's a double standard when it comes to white on black crime, it is. But when black people commit crimes toward white folks, you barely hear anything about it. Like late last year, you had a bunch of black thugs going around the country attacking white folks, breaking into their businesses, beating them up simply because they were white. And whenever the media would report it, they don't say a bunch of black thugs. They just say, oh, this white person was attacked by teenagers. But if it was the other way around, they would say white teenagers attacked the black person or black people. It's a hate crime. But this double standard that's in America is wicked. It's really wicked. That's why children who love what's right, or people who love what's right, got to come together as one so we can fight against evil.
According to Jesse, these folks just look for an opportunity to dance in the blood of a black person to enrich themselves and foment anger to help them gather more supporters. According to Reverend Peterson, this is not what a Christian minister is supposed to do. We'll be right back.
Thomas Jefferson said, people cannot be ignorant and free at the same time. Everything should be done at the local level, and people should be interested in what's going on at the local level. Full Disclosure has that rare and unique ability to bring the issues to the people that they don't find anyplace else in the news.
Welcome back to Full Disclosure and our interview with the controversial Reverend Jesse Lee Peterson. We asked Jesse Lee, what is the driving motivation for the people who are encouraging racial conflict? This wickedness is fueled by what? Would you say it was fueled more by politics or more by greed?
Greed, absolutely. That's what this world is all about. That's why we must be born again, so we can see what's going on, and that way we can be of the world but not involved in what's going on. We can be a little on the outside, observing what's going on and not be caught up with it. But when you're angry, you can't help but be caught up with it.
But the leaders of all these programs seem to be doing everything they can to increase friction between the races. Why aren't they charged by law enforcement officials for inciting to riot, we ask him.
Because, again, there's a double standard in America. Black folks can do whatever they want. Liberal women can do whatever they want, and the gays can do what they want. The rest of us normal folks can't. And the media control that. The liberal politicians are in control of that.
He then demonstrated how his position can make the opposition enraged. He said something on his radio show that caused a significant uproar among the feminists.
I said the other day that one of the greatest mistakes America made was to allow women the opportunity to vote. And I said, and I said especially liberal women, and particularly liberal women, because now they're in position of power, and it's not in their nature to handle power, because what they do is based on what they think and feel. And I said because of that, these liberal women, they're into politics, they're in politics now, they run big corporations around the country, they're making decisions. And because they're so emotional, because they hate their fathers and they hate men, the decisions that they are making are affecting the families in a negative way, because they hate men, and so everything they do is against the family, against what is right.
Then he cited a litany of problems he claims are caused by the power granted to liberal women.
Because of these liberal women, we can one day possibly have same-sex marriage in our country, because there are more of them than there are us voting and stuff like that. Because of these liberal women, abortion is out of control, because it's a woman's right to have abortion. Because of these women, Sandra Fluke, remember her? She wanted us to pay her $3,000 a year so she could have out-of-wedlock sex.
Oh, yes.
She wanted contraceptions and stuff, but she wanted us to pay for it, and then got mad when we said no. Remember they attacked Rush Limbaugh and stuff like that.
Yes.
And then Rush called them out because I think he called her like a slut, because she wanted to have all this sex and she has no shame about it, and she's asking us to pay for it.
And this is the core of his argument against the liberal ideology, especially endorsed by women.
These women are creating a shameless society. Out-of-wedlock birth is popular in the entertainment world, in the political world. There's no shame about that with these women. And there are more of them than us, so it's possible we're going to have same-sex marriage one day.
And you can only imagine what was the result of making these statements over the air in a radio broadcast.
All hell broke loose when I said that. I've been called woman hater, this hater, that hater, but the conservative women who love men, who love their fathers, who don't hate God, they see where I'm coming from. But the liberal women are having a hissy fit. They're worse than a wet hen. They're madder than a wet hen. And but I don't care. I love what's right. They love lies. I love the truth. I'm going to tell the truth.
But it has to be wearing to face the constant and unrelenting hate from around the world. We ask him what he does to cope, and if he had any misgivings about being so open and forthright with his convictions. So how do you handle it then when you get these nasty messages? Do you say, oh, Jesse, I shouldn't have done that? or are you rethinking your strategy at all?
Not at all. It's funny to me. It's really funny. See, what people don't know, when you truly enter into the kingdom of heaven within, meaning that when you truly overcome your anger, when you don't have any iota of anger, because anger is not of God, it separates you from God, right? But when you truly overcome that, God put an invisible spiritual bubble around you. And the way the world think about you and feel about you and what they say to you doesn't affect you at all. So inwardly, because I don't feel anything about it. Some people ask me, how do you sit in those debates like that and don't get angry? I don't get angry because I don't remember to get angry. It doesn't occur to me to get angry. I have compassion for my enemy. I don't resent my enemies. And so that's why I don't feel anything about it, one iota.
We ask him what we as individuals can do to counteract the campaigns of hatred and conflict that are being perpetrated by social engineers and promoted by the mainstream media. As usual, he was very direct.
White Americans got to get over the fear of dealing with black folks. They got to be able to put their feet on solid ground and tell the truth. And if blacks get mad, let them be mad. So white Americans got to tell black people the truth. And when blacks get angry, just let them yell and scream and shout. And the way you're looking at me now with a nice smile, and let them act out. And then they will have to think about what you said. But if you're afraid and don't tell them, or you get mad when you tell them the truth, they feel that they're right and that you're wrong. But it's the truth that's going to bring on a change, not this lie that most people are into today. And not fear, because when you have fear, you bring out the worst in a person. Those who truly believe in God and who are guided by what is right, we got to confront Satan and tell them the truth. Satan worked through these people, evil does. And we got to, right in our environment, and start right where we are, with our family, with our friends, and one thing will lead to another. We got to be a living example of that and then speak truth to it. And some will hear it and change, and others will hear it and reject it. And I'm not concerned about the ones who reject the truth. I'm concerned about those who will hear the truth and their life will change and they can go live their life. You got to be that. The Bible says that we are the salt of the earth and the light of the world. And you be that light by being an example of what God is about, rather than just a talker about it.
Reverend Jesse Lee Peterson certainly isn't just a talker, that's for sure. We want to thank Reverend Peterson for appearing on Full Disclosure today and bringing us the news behind the news. We want to know what you, the viewers, think. Have you ever heard this side of the news on a mainstream media? And would you like to hear more of this politically incorrect perspective that you won't hear in the mainstream media? Please call our Full Disclosure Town Hall number and tell us what you think at 1-800-867-7777. That's 1-800-867-7777. And if you leave your name and number, we'll get back to you. Or you can log on to our website at fulldisclosure.net and leave your opinion there. And if you leave your email address, we'll be happy to respond. I'm Leslie Dutton. Please join us next time for another edition of Full Disclosure. Thank you.
To respond to this question or comment on this program, please call 800-867-7777 or visit fulldisclosure.net. Transcripts or DVD copies of this program are also available on our website. Full Disclosure, the news behind the news. Relentless, probing, fearless. This is Emmy Award-winning Full Disclosure with Leslie Dutton, bringing you the truth by revealing the news behind the news.
Richard Fine has been in solitary confinement in the Los Angeles County Jail for 7 months. His crime? He's pointed out that the LA Superior Court judges are being illegally paid $46,000 every year over and above their state salaries by the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors. Superior Court Judge Yaffe sentenced Mr. Fine to an indefinite term of coercive confinement. Full Disclosure has conducted a number of phone interviews with the jailed attorney, Richard Fine. We filed a series of requests with the Sheriff's Department to interview him in person in jail, but have been denied access at every request. Why? We want to know. Victoria Kim from the Los Angeles Times was allowed to interview Mr. Fine. She wrote this article, which with the limitations of the paper gave a brief account of Mr. Fine's situation. But Full Disclosure is still being denied access. In fact, the spokesman, Steve Whitmore, sent this email in response to our request. The sheriff did not approve the LA Times reporter access to this inmate. She apparently did so on her own. Isn't this alarming? That anyone who wants can walk into the jail anytime they want? We suppose the sheriff had more control over the jails. Perhaps the issue is cameras in the jail. But wait, ABC's 2020 producer Terry Whitcraft took their cameras into the jail to interview an inmate for their show, just a few days prior to our last request. Armed with this information, we telephoned the sheriff and placed another request to interview Mr. Fine. The sheriff's spokesman, Whitmore, not only said no, but hell no.
Hi, Leslie. This is Steve Whitmore. I am unfortunately the bearer of bad news. The sheriff has repeatedly told me that that will not happen, and so your request has been denied. And he has not. I just talked to him yesterday about this, and he said it again. He said, no, that's not going to happen. So it's not going to happen, Leslie, and I'm sorry to have to deliver that to you, but that is what the sheriff's decision is, and it's his
Why? Why is the Sheriff's Department afraid of poor little full disclosure? Our purpose is to show how Mr. Fine is being treated and allow our viewers to form their own opinion regarding Mr. Fine's incarceration. So why won't the sheriff allow us into the jail with our cameras? He has before, and in fact his deputies gave us a tour of the inmate reception area. As part of his defense, Mr. Fine has submitted a writ of habeas corpus, which the court ordered the sheriff to respond with the reasons why he's holding Mr. Fine. The sheriff refused and asked to be dismissed from the case. And when the matter was appealed to the district court, Federal Judge Walters denied the sheriff's request as moot. Why? Why didn't the sheriff state that Judge Yaffe ordered him to keep Mr. Fine in jail? Is he protecting Judge Yaffe because the judge is doing something illegally? Are the judges protecting the sheriff? Or is the sheriff protecting the judges? And is full disclosure going to have to get a court order to gain media access to Mr. Fine? We want to know what you, the viewers, think. Please respond to our survey and leave your comments below. Number 1. Should full disclosure file a court order to gain media access to Mr. Fine in jail? Yes or no? Number 2. Who's protecting who? Do you think the sheriff is protecting Judge Yaffe? Yes or no? Or number 3. Do you think the sheriff is hiding something about the condition of Mr. Fine? Yes or no? Be sure to leave your comments below. I'm Leslie Dutton. Thank you.
In the government, there's a phrase used to restrict access to information. That phrase, need to know. At fulldisclosure.net, we want you to have all the information you need to be an informed citizen, unlimited access to all the information we've gathered on our TV show. And if you can't watch us on your local cable station, streaming video of complete shows when you want them. Fulldisclosure.net, when you need to know the news behind the news.
Can a judge sit on a case where he has a personal interest in one of the parties before him? The U.S. House Judiciary Committee is planning a hearing on the federal recusal guidelines amid controversies that have swept through the state court systems in recent years. But what about when the judge is a defendant? It makes no sense anywhere in the rational world. But here in California, it's happened. And if once wasn't enough, it's happening again right now. Full Disclosure has been following the sorry saga of the incarceration of attorney Richard Fine, who has challenged California judges who have accepted illegal payments. He has filed numerous petitions, writs of habeas corpus, that he be let out of jail. His first appeal was denied by U.S. District Court Judge John Walter and Magistrate Judge Carla Worley. Marty Mason was the former office manager for Mr. Fine's law firm. She explained to Fred Sotilli on the set of Full Disclosure what Mr. Fine did in response to the denial of his writ.
So he filed an appeal with the Ninth Circuit Court. Judge Yaffe from the Superior Court answered that appeal and apparently made some false statements to the court and even cited to an order that doesn't even exist. And we know that because I pulled a copy of the docket and we've all looked at it. There's no such order listed anywhere on it, so it doesn't exist.
So Mr. Fine prepared a new petition with the district court showing the new evidence involving Judge Yaffe.
And he also named as parties to the petition the district court, specifically the same judges Walter and Worley, as respondents because they had refused to follow the statute USC section 2243 and when they denied the first petition.
The statute USC 2243 that Marty references requires the court to act immediately by either releasing the petitioner or by denying the writ or to show cause. They did none of the above. And so, Mr. Fine named both the judges as defendants in his appeal petition to the district court.
Fred took down those documents to file with the district court, and we were given the shock of the year on what level of deviousness they're willing to play with the case these days.
Fred Sotilli, a volunteer who files all of Mr. Fine's petitions with the court, described what Marty referred to as the shock of the year.
This started off to be a real easy job for a day. Simply go down and file these documents, and the people that work there in the pro se window in the federal building are really very nice, helpful people. So I went down and I brought these 4 documents, and I said, well, we're going to file these today. And they said, okay, no problem. And I said, I need to know who the judges are going to be, who you're going to assign these to. And they said, well, we're going to assign them to Judge Walter and Judge Carla Worley. And I said, well, you know, I felt kind of smug about it. I said, well, you can't do that. You see, they're the defendants. If you look on page 2, you see that, and the girl at that window, she looked on page 2 and says, oh, you're right. Yeah, that doesn't make any sense. Let me go talk to my supervisor.
The supervisor wasn't going to change court procedure to follow the law.
She talked to her for about 5 minutes, and then it was pretty heated looking, and she came out and took about 10 steps and then went back in and talked to her again. And finally she came out and she said, look, I know it doesn't make any sense and it doesn't seem right, but since it's a pro se filing, it has to be reviewed by Judge John Walter, and it will then be assigned to Magistrate Judge Carla Worley. I said, well, one of these documents says that we don't want a magistrate judge, and this is our right and everything. And she says, well, I know, but this is our procedure, so we have to follow it. I'm just a clerk. And I said, okay, I appreciate that, but you do realize that I'll be back next week with motions to recuse those people, you know, and everything, rightfully so. And she said, yes, procedurally, that's what you should do. Unfortunately, you'll have to do that, and we'll see you next week.
So the wheels of the court bureaucracy slowly turned, but they turned on Fred Sotilli and Mr. Fine.
Well, I came back the following week, and now there was a man at the window, and another really nice guy, and he's used to seeing me. Hi, you know, how you doing? And I said, well, here's the recusals as promised. And he said, I'm familiar with the case, and just let me have those, and we'll take care of it right away. And he opened the computer, and he said, I don't believe it. He says, I can't file these. I said, well, you have to. He said, well, I can't. The case is closed. I said, wait a minute. I brought this last Friday. When was the case closed? He said, it was closed on Wednesday, the following Wednesday. I said, well, who did it? And he actually turned the computer around. He says, you see the signature? Judge John Walter.
Judge John Walter dismissed and closed the case in which he was named a defendant. How could this happen in any court in America?
I told Mr. Fine, and he said, well, you can't do that. That's ridiculous. He said, there's an FRCP rule. It's called Rule 60. And we'll have to invoke that in order to actually file those papers. A judge can't rule in a case where he's the defendant. This all started with Judge Yaffe doing this. He ruled in a case where he's the defendant. That's why Richard's in jail. And now these judges do the same thing, backing up Judge Yaffe by committing the same crime. I mean, anybody would see how unethical that would be to be the judge in your own case, and that's what he did. He did it. First Yaffe did it, then Walter and Worley did it, then they did it again. So now, you know, this is where we are right now anyway. They just don't get it. They're obviously not stupid people. So what are they?
We asked longtime paralegal Marty Mason to give her opinion on the conduct of the Los Angeles Superior Court and this U.S. District Court judge.
Well, since it's such a no-brainer, such a simple issue that you cannot be a judge in a case in which you're a party, then I really even hate to use the word, but it is no exaggeration to say that this is just a bombshell of a cover-up. Judge Walter and Magistrate Judge Worley have gone way out on a limb to dismiss a case in which they are parties. Obviously, that is going to go up to the Ninth Circuit on appeal. The situation has just gotten so ridiculous. I keep wondering if the head judge of the entire district, Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy, won't just show up someday and bang some heads together because it's ridiculous.
So Marty Mason indicates that this case, where the U.S. District Court Judge John Walters sat in judgment and dismissed a case against himself, may have to go to the U.S. Supreme Court and Justice Kennedy. She suggests that there may not be a judge anywhere in California who will take the proper action.
As bad as it was, the situation with the under-the-table payments to the local judges, that is nothing compared to what is going on now. Now it's about whether we even still have a judicial system. And we certainly do not, if it is possible for a judge to rule on a case that involves him personally.
Indeed, there is a question whether or not we've lost our judicial system. In 2007, and as recent as November 2009, the judges of the 2nd Appellate District of the state of California, all 31 of them, have recused themselves from the case of Sturgeon versus the County of Los Angeles, where Judicial Watch organization has been battling in court to stop the illegal payments being made to the judges. So when 31 justices of the Court of Appeals recognize the conflict and can no longer function in their official capacity, perhaps this substantiates that our judicial system is threatened. We would like to know what you, the viewers, think. Number 1. Do you think there's a possibility that the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeal will let stand Judge Walters' decision to dismiss a case where he was the defendant? Yes or no? Number 2, do you think that a court administrator that assigns a case to a judge that is named as a defendant in the case should be prosecuted? Yes or no? Number 3, should judges who have been found to have a conflict of interest in a case and have refused to recuse themselves be prosecuted, punished, and fined? Yes or no? Be sure to leave your comments below. I'm Leslie Dutton. Thank you.
For the news behind the news, wherever and whenever you want it, go to fulldisclosure.net and get programs on topics affecting you. Weekly updates and alerts on hot topics, video streaming of Full Disclosure episodes. It's award-winning, hard-hitting, corruption-fighting news coverage. And it's only available at fulldisclosure.net. Fulldisclosure.net, the news behind the news.
Here in California, bond ratings are in the toilet, and the state can't pay its bills. Government employees are being laid off, and union employees are mobilizing their forces to prevent the rating of their lucrative pension plans. The elected officials are between a rock and a hard place, so the elected officials have finally decided to take urgent action. What did they do? They called a hearing so that they could get together and talk to themselves and pretend like they were trying to solve the problem. Naturally, Full Disclosure was there. We're over here across the street from the Museum of Tolerance, where the Senate Select Committee and Assembly Committees just held a hearing on the subject of government reforms.
I think what the committee really did up there was a dog and pony show. It's what I would call a dog and pony show.
They tried to prevent Full Disclosure from recording the hearing, but when KTLA showed up, they couldn't stop us without stopping them. So we got inside with our cameras. What did we get for our efforts? Hours of meaningless drivel.
Principles that I've come to really...
In the instances where there were outcomes established, was there a change in the legislative and the political cultures? Because I at least am sensing, and maybe I'm just hopefully just too hopeful.
And I've been on budget committee before and in budget subcommittee hearings. I don't understand the issues I'm voting on. I mean, it's absurd.
The thing I would say here is that any fundamental change is going to incur resistance.
We are running a little long because we're having an important conversation.
They spent hours talking to themselves, and after an eternity of government babble, they allowed the people in the attendance only 15 minutes for public comment. But the public wasn't having any of that dog and pony show. Instead of discussing the mundane bureaucratic speak, the public gave the legislators a piece of their mind. It's government corruption. That's the problem in California, not the overtaxed public. Interestingly, the ire of the public focused on the courts.
Before we talk about taxes and budgets and those sort of things, let's talk about the corruption and the waste.
Our judicial system is the most corrupt judicial system in the nation, in Los Angeles, California. You need to know that.
The audience was aware of the jailed Mr. Richard Fine, who has sounded the clarion call identifying the illegal payments being made to the LA Superior Court judges.
Some of you up here, go talk to Mr. Fine in court, and let's solve our legal problem, and let's get rid of these illegally paid judges.
With regards to this particular hearing, when talking about government reform, oversight, and cost savings, I think I would agree with this gentleman here that the courts are really a place to look. I think we need additional oversight over the courts, which with as much money as they get from our state budget.
You have no clue how uptight the voters are. There will be pitchforks taken out in June of 2010, I promise you.
I do agree with this gentleman about Richard Fine. He did uncover that there was double charging of extra legal benefits they were charging both the counties and the states. He was jailed for it.
Gabriella Holt brought up the nefarious vote taken during the budget debate that supposedly made the payments to the judges legal.
Senator Steinberg, who interestingly enough convened this committee with Assemblywoman Bass, introduced SB X 211, which approved supplemental pay and benefits of judges throughout the state, in direct contradiction to an appellate court decision, Sturgeon versus the County of Los Angeles, which made these payments illegal.
And it involved introducing an ex post facto law, which is against the California Constitution and the federal Constitution.
This SB 2X11 was passed on a weekend extraordinary session, and the only one I would blame is Senator Steinberg, who put it in there.
It was apparent that the attendees were disappointed by the meaningless committee hearing.
You gentlemen are basically, what you're telling us here today, those of us that didn't fall asleep, you're rearranging the chairs on the Titanic.
We spoke with Gabriella Holt, who is the president and CEO of the Citizens for California Reform, to get her reaction. She was unimpressed by this hearing that was supposed to be all about government reform.
They got up there and they said some really nice language: zero-based budgeting, performance-based budgeting, responsibility, changing the culture. You know, all those buzzwords that people say over and over and over. Oh, we're really going to get reform, we're going to get a balanced budget, they're going to do all these things. People don't know what that means.
She clearly and succinctly identified the problem.
And the fact of the matter is, those legislators don't listen to the people. They listen to themselves and they listen to their special interests. They're doing this whole reform because there's all these reform movements out there right now. And it's, you know, if they don't start talking about it on the inside, it's going to come from the outside. Well, little do they know it's coming from the outside anyway.
Well, I noticed that the chairman, Mike Fuhrer, tried to cut you off a couple of times. Do you feel that you had adequate time to say what you had to say?
Absolutely not. They had a dozen panelists. They had 90 minutes scheduled for their presentation. They took 2.5 hours. A dozen people. So about a dozen people lined up to speak, and they got 15 minutes. The public gets 15 minutes, and the dog and pony gets 2.5 hours. Last I saw, that the legislators and the staffers work for the people. We don't work for them. And frankly, it should have been the other way around. They should have done a succinct presentation and then opened it up to the public and allowed them to speak as long as they needed to speak. But what's interesting to me is generally when you have public hearings, you have it in a public place, you know, open to the public so anybody can come in. Coming into somewhere where it's very guarded and you know, very secured and very controlled, where the public just really doesn't have as easy as access to, is very interesting to me. Why they didn't hold it at City Hall, the County Board of Supervisors, you know, on Building of Administration. We got lots of public buildings.
So in other words, you kind of think the reason they had it here at this private facility is to limit the amount of public participation?
I believe that to be true, yes. I believe that to be true. You're a public agency, you're having a public hearing.
She brings up an interesting point. There was little public notice, and as we found out, it was tightly controlled. Was the lack of audience attendance designed on purpose?
We have changes in administrations and leadership.
So in other words, you kind of think the reason they had it here at this private facility is to limit the amount of public participation?
I believe that to be true, yes. I believe that to be true. You're a public agency, you're having a public hearing, where was the 72-hour notice, for the public? I mean, where was the information? And where's the public access?
We asked her what she thought the legislators learned from the hearing. Looking at all the people that testified today, what do you think was the message that came out of the testimony from the public?
I think the primary concern of the people who testified was the judiciary system on a number of things. The corruption in the courts, questions on decisions, and just who's overseeing the courts, and why is it that it seems that the courts are virtually left without any oversight or any way for people to come forward and express their concerns. That was an overwhelming sort of tenor of almost every person that spoke, I believe.
We want to know what you, the viewers, think. Please respond to our survey and leave your comments below. Number 1, do you think that corruption in the judiciary is a major problem in California? Yes or no? Number 2, do you think it's government bureaucracy that's the major problem in California? Yes or no? Or number 3, is it the legislators and the elected officials that are the problem in California? Yes or no? Be sure to leave your comments below. I'm Leslie Dutton. Thank you. This is a quick update on our struggle to reestablish public access television in Los Angeles. It is just a small segment of a documentary that we are producing showing the problems facing public access channels across America. This sequence that you're going to see was recorded in the office of LA City Councilman Bill Rosendahl with Stanley Scheinbaum.
As to whether the City Council here in LA is going to get around to bringing back public access.
Yeah, it's not.
It's not.
No.
Now, what about the proposal that we put together to start with one channel?
I think it's a great proposal, and I think you need to lobby my colleagues on it. And if we can get the pressure going, maybe Time Warner would give us a channel. They don't have to. That's the problem. They can go like this and say, hey, it's all Sacramento, folks. Sorry.
So it appears that we're back at square one, but we're not going to quit. The LA City Council's unmotivated to relinquish the millions of dollars that they receive from Time Warner, which is being paid by subscribers specifically to support public access television. So we're going to rally our troops and show the City Council that the citizens of Los Angeles demand they give us back our voice. Give us back our public access. We need a grassroots army to storm City Hall. To enlist in the fight, please call me here at Full Disclosure at 310-822-4449 or send me your email at lesliedutton@fulldisclosure.net. We need your help and support. Together we can win back our public airwaves. We will continue to bring you updates in our mission to bring public concerns to you, the public, in our News Behind the News. Thank you.
You can watch this program in its entirety as a Full Disclosure subscriber, or you can purchase the DVD on our website. Full Disclosure will continue to bring you the news behind the news. Relentless, probing, fearless. This is Emmy Award-winning Full Disclosure with Leslie Dutton, bringing you the truth by revealing the news behind the news.
It is time for this board to pass a resolution
calling for no confidence or the resignation of the sheriff. Thank you.
I strongly urge this board to take whatever corrective action is necessary to stop the sheriff from continuing to squander our valuable resources in this time of need, and to stop making a mockery of the board and the good citizens of Orange County. Thank you.
I would suggest that the Board of Supervisors admit that they made a mistake appointing Sheriff Hutchins. This could be accomplished by a vote of no confidence. Thank you.
I'm a registered Democrat, an activist, and I will work to get the sheriff's opponent in office if she continues down this dangerous path of disarming Orange County. Thank you.
Citizens of Orange County, California are enraged at their sheriff for dramatically reducing the number of concealed carry weapon permits. They argue they have a right, a Second Amendment right, to bear arms.
Basically, all of us in this room, all of us in this state, and all of us in this country have the right to own and bear arms. And I underline bear arms, okay? Firearm doesn't do you much good if it's locked in the trunk of your car or in a gun safe in your basement, okay? So keep that in mind when we talk about the Second Amendment.
I've heard discussions today about referring to the rights of the sheriff to do whatever. Sheriff has no rights over me. The sheriff is granted authority over me, over us, to do her job per the law. Sheriff cannot create the law. The sheriff follows the law.
The Orange County Board of Supervisors asked the recently appointed Sheriff Hutchins to explain her change in policy.
In July of last year, I ordered a review of all existing concealed weapons permits, specifically looking at the issue of good cause. I implemented a new policy, and that was adopted in September of last year. The main issue we have been discussing for the last several months is the issue of good cause. There are some who have alleged that this is a Second Amendment issue. I would disagree. This does not impact an individual's right to have a firearm in their home or their place of business. The fact is, there is a law in the state of California prohibiting the carrying of a concealed weapon. I can't change that. That exists. There's a section that gives the sheriff or police chief of a jurisdiction the ability to issue a license as an exception to that law. That law specifically states that the person must have good cause. I believe that I have taken a common sense approach to good cause. That is, you must demonstrate that you are at some greater risk than anyone else in the population, in the general population.
But the citizens disagreed with good cause being predicated upon financial value, as stated by Ed Worley from the National Rifle Association.
The other thing is, if you look at the good cause issuance, it says in the Orange County website, an occupation requires frequent transportations of large sums of money or other valuables when alternative protection is not allowed. Ladies and gentlemen of the Board of Supervisors, does that mean I have to be rich and well endowed with lots of resources and money and everything to be able to get a concealed carry permit? Because let me tell you something. The most important thing that I have in my life, the most important thing that's most cherished by me, is my family. When I transport my family to and from wherever I'm going, am I supposed to hire a security guard? The most important thing we're seeing here is
Mr. Worley, your
very
time's
quickly,
up.
ma'am,
Yeah.
I'll finish up, thank you.
If you could.
Is that the policy here is telling you that the most important thing in a person's life is your physical possessions, and it's not. The most important thing in my life is my family, and my ability to protect my family shouldn't be predicated upon an arbitrary and capricious issuance of permits.
No matter whether your occupation is a jeweler, a lawyer, a doctor, the underlying reason for our CCW is for personal protection. This is recognized by many other county sheriffs who follow the law.
This gentleman brings up a good point. How is it that other sheriffs around California are issuing CCW permits to people with much less challenging good cause declarations?
Over 50% of California sheriffs accept self-defense as good cause in their counties. Does the sheriff feel that these sheriffs are not following the law?
It has become increasingly apparent from news reports that the sheriff has made up her mind on the course of action she plans for her policy changes on CCWs. Even though it is clear that she is not just following the law, she is interpreting the law to suit her own agenda. After lengthy debate and public testimony from several law professors, it is obvious that the law is broad with respect to CCW issuance and that many law-abiding sheriffs in the state of California have a far different policy on issuing CCWs, a policy that allows ordinary citizens to request a CCW for personal protection as long as they meet the background and training requirements.
But Sheriff Hutchins stood her ground.
I know a gentleman from the NRA brought up an example of good cause, someone who carries money or jewelry, and I would ask you to again look at the policy that's in front of you, and on the first page there are several bullets, and it goes over to the second page, and I won't bore you with reading all of that, and I won't take up any more time, but I would draw your attention to the note at the bottom. These examples are not intended to be all-inclusive. They are provided merely for your reference. Also, state and local laws do not prohibit an adult from having a concealed weapon in their home or place of business. A couple of the speakers brought up the fact that the sheriff cannot make the law, and that's true, and I think that's been my point. I don't make the law, but I am required to enforce the law, and I am required to abide by the law. And I understand that this is a very passionate issue for a number of people, and believe me, I appreciate that. But I have to keep reminding there is a law in the state of California. If that law did not exist, then anybody with good moral character and a background check, I'd be happy to give them a CCW. But that is not the law in the state of California. I have no control over this. There was an issue, several of the speakers talked about states that are shall-issue states. This is not a shall-issue state. Again, that is not within my control. That is not appropriate for me to try and find a way around what the existing law is. It doesn't matter whether I agree with that law, and on quite the contrary, I think that I need to enforce the laws whether I agree with them or not.
Bill Hunt is a former Orange County Sheriff Lieutenant and is running as a candidate to replace Sheriff Hutchins in 2010. Full Disclosure interviewed him to discover his position on issuing concealed carry permits. We asked him if he thought Sheriff Hutchins' policy of restricting CCWs was making Orange County safer.
Well, of course it's not making it safer. I mean, you look at the gun control advocates, and they try to use fear as a weapon, for that issue. But the reality is, the data's in. I mean, there's a gentleman named John Lott who did a study, and he put it in a book called More Guns, Less Crime, and he shows that the data, statistically, in the United States, in states and counties that have shall-issue positions, crime goes down. Ultimately, what business is the sheriff in? Crime reduction. So from an operational standpoint, there is absolutely no reason not to support and defend the constitutional right of law-abiding citizens to be able to carry weapons.
If the statistical evidence is so overwhelming, then why are so many police chiefs and sheriffs against the policy of arming citizens? We ask him.
Well, it doesn't make sense, but obviously it's a fundamental belief and value for her. I believe if she had to run for office, as she does this time, on that value, on that policy, on that belief, that that the people of Orange County are going to reject her for it. And that's part of the reason why it's so important to have an election to fill that position. Because until somebody's been vetted, until we know what their background is, we know what their values are, we know that they can go out and build support in the community, that they can build support in the organization, that they can show that they can do the leadership things that are going to be required for such a high-profile, politically charged office, then you're going to have problems down the road, and that's what's happening here. So, Sandra Hutchins is going to have to go out and defend those policies.
The citizens who attended the board meeting agreed with Mr. Hunt. They questioned the board's selection of appointing Sandra Hutchins as sheriff.
Instead of taking away concealed carry permits, I'm asking the sheriff to issue permits to all law-abiding citizens who apply and who pass a background check and some other tests, as other states have done. The sheriff needs to realize that law-abiding citizens who are pro-gun are not the enemy of law enforcement.
At every turn, the sheriff has demonstrated she is not right for Orange County.
There's a horrible situation going on here. The supervisors voted to accept this sheriff. out of Los Angeles County knowing what's going on in Los Angeles County. And I think that everyone here needs to think about what was the thought behind that. Why would you bring someone from Los Angeles County here with that mindset?
What vetting was done in appointing her that allowed this important policy to be ignored or given inadequate attention? How did we end up with an appointed sheriff that is so out of step with the interests of the community she has been appointed to serve?
We asked Mr. Hunt if he were elected sheriff, what he would accept as a good cause requirement.
In the state of California, there's a good cause requirement, and that's what sheriffs like Sandra Hutchins try to hide behind to defend what I think is an undefensible and unconstitutional position. But the Supreme Court has just ruled that not only does the Second Amendment apply to a well-regulated militia, but it also applies to us as individuals, and not just in the home, but also as individuals to protect ourselves for self-defense. Now, if we have one person, elected or otherwise, who is preventing us from the means to exercise that right, then what good is the right? It's no good at all. So I think philosophically, the sheriff has sworn an oath to support and defend the Constitution. The Supreme Court has made it, has qualified the issue and said we do have that right. I think the data shows that in states where we do allow law-abiding American citizens to exercise the right to self-defense, crime goes down. I cannot find a legitimate reason not to take the policy that I'm taking on the Second Amendment.
We challenged him. Would he make Orange County a shall-issue county?
What my policy will be is if you're a law-abiding citizen, you pass the background check, you take the training, you pay your fees, then I'm going to issue you the weapon.
We want to know what you, the viewers, think. Please respond to our survey and leave your comments below. Number 1, do you think that our streets and communities are safer if people are legally carrying concealed weapons? Yes or no? Number 2, do you think that self-protection is an adequate requirement to warrant the issuance of a concealed carry permit? Yes or no? And number 3, do you agree that the top law enforcement officers in your county should be elected and not appointed? Yes or no? Please be sure to leave your comments below. For almost a year, Full Disclosure has been requesting an interview with Sheriff Hutchins to discuss this and other issues facing Orange County. We are hopeful that she will grant our request soon. In the meantime, we will be airing our recent full interview of Mr. Hunt in the near future. I'm Leslie Dutton. Thank you. Enduring an indeterminate sentence of coercive confinement, Richard I. Fine isn't just languishing in jail. He's fighting furiously, exercising every legal option available.
Then I'll go into the California Supreme Court, and if the California Supreme Court doesn't enter the stay, then I'll go into the United States District Court. Sooner or later, I will win.
There is a team of dedicated activists who are doggedly working to support his cause. We caught up with Fred Sotilli, who was running legal documents from the LA Central Men's Jail to Federal Express.
Yep, got about a half an hour to get it all done. Wow.
We invited him to come inside and explain what he and his group are doing to help Mr. Fine. He explained the tremendous impediments Mr. Fine has to overcome to continue his fight while incarcerated.
Well, he's in a cell that's very small. You can almost touch all four walls. It really is that small. And in his cell, he doesn't have too many accoutrements. He has to write with a pencil that as it goes dull, the writing becomes more and more difficult to read. It's not a nice, crisp, brand new pencil all the time, especially when you're writing a 50-page document. And this is that document. This is his handwritten, you know, all these pages, page after page. He did this. Now, in his cell, he has a bunk bed. He's in solitary, so there's no one in there with him. He's really lonely. He sleeps on the bottom one, and he stands, and he uses the top one as his desk. He uses the back pages to support the next page so that he has a writing surface. And he literally stood on his feet. He's a 69-year-old man. He stood on his feet at a bunk bed with a pencil, and he wrote this 59 pages. Now, he did this as fast as he could, and you could see when you looked at them that there was virtually no mistakes. In other words, he knows this material so well that he can start here and just write this thing from memory. Remember, this is what he's thinking about. He's in jail. 6 months now, okay? Now, when he finished, he called me collect, which is what he does. He calls me collect. And he said, Fred, I'm ready. Come and get the papers. Once I had this, the fun began. I had to rush home, and I had to make this into this.
Now, tell me, why did you have to rush?
The man has been in jail for 5 3/4 months.
Now going on to 6 months of solitary confinement. Every week, Fred Sotilli and his team carry the next appeal from Mr. Fine to the court. And to get the appeals into a form that the court will accept is an arduous task.
I took these papers, and one by one, I scanned them, and I darkened the scanning so that we would have this copy. This is a much more readable copy, because you're going to be doing this many hours. To take 50 pages like this and type them to make them look like this takes a real lot of time. Now, you just asked me the most important question. Why did I have to start immediately? The reason is, as you're going through these papers and you get to page 6, you might get to a word that's smudgy, and you're not sure if it's about or until. Or you're not sure if it's them or then, or sometimes the context doesn't tell you. There could be different meanings, and this has to be his words. I don't make it up and make my own little story. It's got to really be done right. So what I would do is, and I say I, but in reality it's another person, and another person worked very hard on this also.
That other person is Marty Mason, the former secretary of Mr. Fine, who worked with him for many years and lives in Georgia.
We would get as far as we could typing, but when we found gaps, words that we couldn't understand, or some discontinuity, that evening, Richard would call me collect. So Monday night he would call collect and say, how we doing, Fred? I said, well, we did 6 pages and we have 3 questions. What did you mean when you said this? Is this number correct? Is this date correct? Is this what you want to say? And he would say yes or no or whatever. And he never, believe it or not, amazingly, he never made a mistake. What he wrote was never wrong. Like, it wasn't, oh, I put the wrong date. But he might have to clarify the date. I'd say, I can't see if that's the 2nd or the 3rd, the way you made the 2, or 2 or a 7, so.
Well, tell me, you scanned the pages.
Right.
And where was the person that was doing the typing, and how did you get them to that person?
Oh, the person doing the typing's in another state.
This is not just a local effort. People across the country are joining the effort to get Mr. Fine out of jail. So you did you fax them to her or email them, or how did you do it?
When I scanned them, I emailed them one at a time, because you have to scan and then you have to attach it and send it. So on her end, she downloaded 50 pages of this and she began to type, and she can't receive the collect call. So you have to call only a desk phone. You can't call a cell phone or a computer or anything. So I had to be the intermediary, and in the meantime, she's typing along as fast as she can, and I'm proofing her typing, although she's as proficient as him. She's very, very seldom makes a mistake, very seldom. But either way, two sets of eyes are better than one, so we're all reading this, and I'm checking with him every night. Well, as time goes by, the urgency increases. Now, the judges who ultimately read this, they only act on this on a Monday. So if they don't have it in their hand on Monday, they're not going to work on it till the following Monday. And he sits in jail for another week.
And another week of Mr. Fine's life is wasted in jail. But he isn't sitting idle. He has filed brief after brief. And every week the various courts use the bureaucracy to allow his case to languish, sometimes by simply ignoring him in violation of the law.
He's never had any opposition. Every time he files one of these things, there's no response. So his writ of habeas corpus, there's no response, there's no reaction. They just say, no, we're not letting you out. They don't have a written response that he can respond to, and by law they have to. In other words, if they're keeping you in, they have to say why, and they have to say who. Who says so and why, and then he gets to respond to that. But you can't respond to no response, so this is why we keep doing this. And this brief is everything. This went to the Ninth Circuit. This describes the whole story and everything that supports it. And, I mean, when you read this, this is the complete brief to this point. It's going to get worse if they don't do the right thing soon. In addition to that, he also filed a motion for immediate release, and we'll see if that's respected. He's done it before. It's been ignored. Okay? And he also filed this certificate of compliance to show that he has done all the right things in the right way. In court, procedure is really important. You have to do things procedurally correct. He has done everything procedurally correct. He's made no procedural mistakes. Okay? The court, on the other hand, has made tons of procedural mistakes. They haven't complied with the law. They haven't done the right thing at the right time. The right person, the right place, and the right time doesn't occur in any of this action.
Is it just sloppiness or incompetence?
No, I would love it if it were that. I would love it if this is intentional. You don't make mistakes month after month. I could see if a judge missed something. I could forgive that. Anybody could. You know, I could see if something was a day or two late. It could happen. It's hard for me to file this stuff on time. It's always an emergency for me. I'm always running out of time. You know, a couple of weeks ago, they sent out, I believe it was an order to show cause, but they sent it to a business address that he used to use, and that sat there. And if we didn't respond to that order to show cause, we would have been in trouble for a procedural mistake. They probably would have thrown the whole case out and used that as the reason. But amazingly, because there's about a dozen people who are constantly reading what they call PACER, which is an accounting of what happens in each court each day. It's something that goes on the internet, and it gives an account of what happened. Some of our other people in our group, one of them discovered something on PACER, and they called us and they said, do you guys realize that a week ago an order to show cause was mailed to this other address, and we were never going to respond to it because we didn't have it. We didn't know about it. I mean, they did the right thing in putting it on PACER, but they did the sleazy thing by sending it to an address where it would never be found. They have basically, well, I think you understand. It's really a low blow. It's really a cheap. They cheated. Anyway, they could have done the ethical thing, but they did the sleazy thing. So, anyway, we discovered that, and we responded to it in time. You know, as we always have.
And so these dedicated activists had to prepare the latest brief and get it to the court by Friday, so the judges would have it on Monday.
Monday morning, we had our work cut out for us. We knew we had to create this. We knew it would have to be overnighted on Thursday, so it could be received on Friday, so the judges would have it in their hand Monday.
And where are the judges?
In San Francisco.
I see.
It's the Ninth Circuit Court in San Francisco. It doesn't get any higher. After that, it's the Supreme Court.
Will the case of Richard I. Fine go all the way to the highest court in the land? Is that where Mr. Fine will finally get the justice he's been fighting so hard to win? Mr. Sotilli is fearful that the Supreme Court won't rise to the occasion and instead protect their own fellow judges in the lower courts, just as all the lower courts have done.
Ultimately, if the Supreme Court doesn't do the right thing, if they support the corrupt judges in the state here in California, then we will know, with no question about it, that the entire United States supports a judiciary and the law that state that judges can just do whatever they want, any way they want, any time they want, to anyone they want.
Would you say then that it would be the end of the rule of law?
Absolutely it will be. That is the moment. That will be the moment when law no longer matters, because, see, law is a level playing field. If you have real law and everybody, the people, the attorneys, and the judges, and everybody all agree and respect that law, and their decisions and actions are based on that law, you have the rule of law. Then law rules.
What can people do? We asked Mr. Sotilli, as concerned citizens, how can people help support his efforts to free Mr. Fine and to bring accountability back to our judicial system?
What I'd like to ask from everybody who sees this is, first, the easy thing, the real easy thing, is to go to freerichardfine.com and donate money. The movement needs money. It needs to grow. It needs to be funded. This stuff all costs money, and it's really important that they do. But even more important than that is to expand the word of this. Spread this throughout the land far and wide. Contact your politicians at the localist level, at the most local level, at the federal level, at every level. Everybody has to become aware of this and join in and work on it. Everybody has to write a letter to somebody, send an email to somebody, a fax. This has to be a topic of conversation. Never mind what the celebrities are doing or what they're paying for ball players or anything like that. This is the entire structure of our country is coming apart. This applies to everybody, every single person.
And so Fred Sotilli is the new freedom rider of the 21st century as he continues to ride the highways of Los Angeles, carrying the struggle of Mr. Richard I. Fine from the Los Angeles County Jail to the highest court in California. Will he be successful? Will Richard Fine finally be free? Will the judges in Los Angeles County be brought to justice? Only time and our individual support will tell. We'd like to know what you, the viewers, think. Please respond to our survey and leave your comments below. Number 1, do you think judges unchecked will destroy the structure of our country? Yes or no? Number 2, have you witnessed corruption in the courts? Yes or no? And number 3, Mr. Fine is fighting for principle. The judge has sent Mr. Fine to jail for an indefinite sentence. Do you think he should stand his ground and continue to fight what he says is a corrupted process? Yes or no? Be sure to leave your comments below. I'm Leslie Dutton. Thank you.
You can watch this program in its entirety as a Full Disclosure subscriber, or you can purchase the DVD on our website. Full Disclosure will continue to bring you the news behind the news.